So this is a pretty good idea for a ritual that we've been brainstorming today. So it combines two things. One, drinking water or maybe even food, but let's look specifically at drinking water, and two, crystals. So Jimmy, what have you learnt, before we go through the ritual, what have you learnt specifically about drinking water and intentions that's set to it?
Yeah, so I just looked into the study done a couple of decades ago by a researcher called Emoto, and he was quite well known in Japan and these sort of new thought circles. And he was the first person to really sort of consider looking at water under a microscope and freezing them to form crystals. And he found that when positive intention was directed at the water and then frozen and then taken a photo of under a microscope, that the crystals were a lot more symmetrical, a lot more elegant, a lot more beautiful than crystals that had been sort of given negative intention. So we found that there was an actual molecular response to water that had actually been given positivity instead of negativity. And from there, more sort of smaller experiments have been done by people just sort of tinkering around with crops, what plants look like with positive water rather than negative. But he was the first, so that was going way back into, I think, the 80s or 90s, and then was given a bit of airtime on a quite popular film called What the Bleep Do We Know in 2005.
And if you think we're made up of 70% water,
over almost three quarters of us is water. So you can imagine what water you put into yourself. It could well be that we're a product of whatever positivity or negativity we're consuming with our water or with our food, and that can actually be seen at a molecular level.
Or even what you put into yourself, but even just the fact that you're sitting there with 70% water, and if somebody sends you hate or sends you positive, it's going to affect your performance as well.
They also looked at it as pure water and polluted water.
Yeah.
So in places like they did a study at what's called the last pure spring in Japan, and they looked at a very polluted river in Japan, and once again it was just a water molecule that they'd frozen.
Yeah.
But even that, the pollution came up as very sort of haphazard crystals, and the very pure water from quite high altitude, it rendered these very beautiful sort of elegant crystals, much the same as if you'd given it positivity. So can be, water may well be corrupted over time by the pollutants we give it as well.
I'm sure it is. So that's the first bit. That's knowing that water is affected by intentions, by energetics. Now we look at the other part of this is a crystal. What do we know about a crystal's ability to retain information, to be like a storage disk, like a CD or a USB or whatever? What's the latest storage disk that goes in computers?
SSDs, flash drives.
Flash drive. So what do we know? I mean, crystals already come with some sort of vibration energy. We know that. We know it has healing qualities. We know it has memory. We know that it's stored over millennia, its whole process, and it's had sunlight on it. And we know that it's got amazing healing benefits. But what do we know of a crystal's ability to store intention? Do we know anything about that?
We do. So you actually have to, when you first get a crystal, it's sort of mentioned that you're supposed to cleanse it and prepare it for yourself. So when you put it in a home, you're supposed to cleanse it. You can do that a variety of ways. You can run it in sort of salt water. You can give it the full moon cycle, leaving it out at dusk for every day of the month until the full moon cycles run over it, or simply run it in salt water in the ocean at the light of a full moon is a popular one as well. Or, apparently if you're short on time, you can even run it under the tap and sort of direct the energies down into the drain as a sort of symbolic, expunging of negative energies as well. So there's a variety of methods. Even something like picturing a white light going through the crystal can be enough to sort of shift it to your own sort of malleability. And then from there you have this sort of almost like a sort of living battery, a sort of earth embodiment that for centuries has been sort of molded over by different cultures. The Hindus, the Romans, the Greeks, they all didn't just think these were pretty rocks. They all thought these had a part to play and a purpose, and today's no different. So
brilliant.
I think you've got a combination there where you've put your water actually on the crystal itself.
Well, that's what we've been talking about. So we go, okay, this has the ability to be cleansed of negative energy and therefore be infused with positive energy. This water that we drink, or food that we eat, if you put it on a bowl, has the ability to then change its crystals and its whole structure. That has the ability to be affected, its whole structure has the ability to be affected by the intention that you give it. So what we can do, we can obviously sit at a dinner table and be grateful every time we have a meal, every time we drink, but sometimes we might forget to do that. So what if we combine those two things? What if once a month, at a full moon, we clean our crystal of all negative energies, we infuse within the crystal a powerful intention of gratitude for the food that we're about to eat, for being nourished, and that this food is going to support us and nourish us and make us better and, maybe drop the veil. So what if we do that every month, and then we sit our water on there? I think two things will happen. One is that energetics will come up through the water, change the molecular structure of the water. That water will be much more healing. It goes within us, it'll be good. The other thing that could happen is just by virtue of the fact that you use that as a coaster, you use that there as a coaster for your plate, you're actually reminding yourself at a very deep level to be grateful. You're reminding yourself of everything that's been infused there. So what I reckon we're going to do, we're going to experiment over the next 30 days. We're going to clean our crystals, infuse them with beautiful intention and energy as we spoke about. We're going to eat and drink out of this, and we'll be back in 30 days to see if our light is brighter.
Cheers.
Cheers.